Hello everyone, Clown Decade, etc, etc. Just to make it clear to everyone right from the start, the point of the thumbnail where it says the phantom far right, that's not to say the far right doesn't exist. I know the far right exists. I interact with them fairly frequently, basically telling them that they're idiots and that they are not helpful and all their ideas are wrong. That is my experience with the far right. However, to think that they are the type of people that could organise what was said to have been organised yesterday is absolutely ridiculous. What do I mean by that? So this all appears to stem from a Sky News report from the morning of the 7th of August, saying convictions of many rioters to be finished this week, as police brace for 30 more far-right protests. Now, an awful lot of people took Sky News at their word with this. It's quite believable that after the scenes we've seen, 30 far-right protests, far-right protests. It's a very odd one, this, I have to say. Because kind of the implications of this are that a far-right protest inevitably leads to a riot. And I don't really buy that, because we saw plenty of peaceful protesting throughout the weekend. Obviously, it's the riots that got the focus, and now everyone's perception is, oh, this happens at every far-right quote-unquote protest. And also obviously now, being against immigration, questioning mass immigration, and going on the streets complaining about that also puts you in this far-right category. So there should have been a lot of alarm bells going instantly here, but the story was just fairly believable. So officers are monitoring threats of further rioting against immigration law specialists, some which had either closed or accepted offers of additional police protection, which perfectly fine. It's interesting though that the headline says far-right protests, and then instantly it turns to, inside the article, oh, it's riots, by the way. A list of solicitor firms and advice agencies has been shared in chat groups as possible targets for gatherings, with the message inviting people to mask up if they attend. And this is an image from TikTok of part of the message, which I spent some time trying to find, and then as it turned out it was actually spread around normie circles. I actually got this image from my brother, so thank you very much for that. But this is the thing, obviously the Twitter algorithm I have plus the people I follow tend to be more on the right-leaning side. No one had seen this. Absolutely no one I'd known had seen this, and they're all pretty aware typically of what goes on in far-right circles, because it's part that we have to compartmentalise and say we reject this. Put it all in one place and say no. And it's the type of thing that if they'd have seen it, they'd have said, here it is, here's a source, ignore these people, they are mentalists. And they probably would have even realised it's a hoax. But this is the thing, I don't know anyone who knows which Telegram chat this came in, assuming it was from Telegram, which obviously raised a lot of questions, and does also raise the likeliness of a hoax. But as I say, we could all believe things were going to escalate, and we could all believe 30 protests were going to happen. The information that it was targeting human rights lawyers, solicitors, and things like that, again, relatively believable, because it's those types of people who have, caused issues with the Rwanda scheme, say. Not saying any of this is justified if it were real, obviously. I am saying that the story made sense. So a few hours later, there were updates on Sky News yet again, saying police change approach with more than 100 protests planned tonight. Police will use new measures to bring officers to the scenes of disorder quicker than usual, the Chief of the College of Policing chief has said. The Chief of the College of Policing chief has said, thanks Sky. Andy Marsh says the police have joined up folks in our intelligence, our tactics, our capabilities, our response, ahead of more than 100 protests planned this evening. Now, this is one that I can't get a source on, and again, I've asked on Twitter, and from what I can tell, my brother doesn't know where that particular part came from. However, Sky did update it mere minutes after Hope Not Hate updated as well. Hope Not Hate is prioritising 48 locations today that have been mentioned as possible locations for far-right mobilisation. However, some reports suggest that there could be as many as 100 mobilisations across the country. Several days ago, a list of 39 locations were compiled and released in an extreme far-right Telegram channel that was one of the central online spaces behind this week's racist violence in Merseyside. This is a hit list of aspirational targets that calls for action up to and including terrorism. Which, as I say every time, if you're going somewhere masked up, you aren't going to do something legal. That is just obvious. But yes, this is pretty much a direct source from Hope Not Hate. They have infiltrated many far-right Telegram channels, they do keep tabs on them. Pretty much everyone in the far right knows this, so again, for them to post 30 or even 100 targets in Telegram, they know that they are asking for this to go mainstream. Because Hope Not Hate has links with government. They got, what, £140,000 or something like that donated from the Home Office in 2019 to 2020. They're regularly invited on by the BBC. They have connections, is my point. And so when they see something like this, they will share that intelligence with the police. And, well, I understand the need to be cautious, but at the same time, it does beg the question, how was this not being properly verified? Why was this being reported by Hope Not Hate and then just taken as gospel? Anyway, without a shadow of a doubt, this ended up causing quite a few issues. Quite a few high streets, especially those in the original 30 targets, closed their high streets early because why wouldn't you? You think there's going to be a riot. Counter-protesters were turning up way in advance of the allotted time of 8 PM. This is a clip from 6 PM. Just big crowds of people turning up in Derby, megaphone ready as usual, ready for this far-right riot that turned out to be a complete hoax. Which kind of begs the question, which I understand they need to be cautious, but at the same time, you can be cautious without letting everyone in the country think that 100 towns are about to be set on fire in the night. This also rattled quite a few of the people who always turn up at Socialist Worker Party protests. I mean, I have no idea if the guy who was screaming out did anything, but that definitely had the reaction of, why the hell are you shouting at me? Do you think I'm a Nazi? In Sheffield, a rather large, again, crowd of people were turning up to show how anti-racist they were, and as you can see in the clips, the police had to quickly try and cordon off the areas where they were going to, which is fine work from the police. It's just, again, as I always say in these videos, why did they feel like they needed to mask up? It raises a few questions. I mean, obviously not everyone's masked up, as you can see, but an awful lot of them are. The police are having to guard them around. Again, these police were probably expecting a far-right riot, and that's not the crowd that they were expecting there. However, elsewhere, the people that turned up were obviously a lot more peaceful, though they did have some of the most ridiculous chants I think I've ever heard in my life.
We are black, white, Muslims, and we're Jews, and we're gay. We are black, white, Muslims, and we're Jews, and we're gay. We are black, white, Muslims, black, white, Muslims, black, white, Muslims, and we're Jews, and we're gay.
They then start chanting about how there are many, many more of the counter-protesters than actual protesters. Again, somehow it's not got into their mind yet that it's a hoax. And I'll get into the source of the hoax later. For now, all you need to know is that it wasn't true. But again, it's just nuts how we're constantly told about how disinformation causes all these issues. And then, well, as we'll go through, when the disinformation causes entire high streets to be shut down and for other mobs that had nothing to do with the hoax to turn up, it kind of begs the question, why wasn't this verified properly? Why was this hoax allowed to go on? Again, I understand caution. There is a line between saying everything's okay and letting 100 towns in Britain think that they are about to experience hell on earth. But they allowed the latter to happen, which caused this reaction for people to turn up because they thought, oh, we have to protect these cities from turning into hell on earth. I mean, this was an image from Brighton. Now, just for context, the policemen are all surrounding 5 guys. Literally 5 people, one with a Union Jack. None of them had masks, by the way, who it is said they turned up to be part of the protest. Whereas obviously the rest of the people there are all people who are on the anti-racist side. And you are always going to get a crowd of that size in Brighton, of all places. It's one of the most left-wing places on the map. And I said on Twitter, I wouldn't be surprised if those guys were heading to the pub. I mean, I'm sure they were simply going along to show their support to the anti-immigration side of things. However, it doesn't excuse people effectively saying that this was 2-tier policing in action. Here's the tweet I got it from. 5 racists, no evidence that they're racist, were protected by dozens of police yesterday in Brighton from a huge crowd of peaceful, caring humans. What do they need the protection for them if they're peaceful? The city was shut down for hours, buses rerouted, shops and pubs boarded up so 5 racists could exercise their right to be racist. Again, I don't even think these guys were... I don't even think these guys saw the telegram at all. I don't think they saw the message. I would go as far to say they obviously didn't see the message, because if you see a message saying mask up and they didn't mask up, they probably didn't see that message. They probably saw on the news, oh, there's a protest going on in Bristol, shall we go along to it? Yeah, sure, take the Union Jack. They went along and then they ended up in this situation. The whole point of this is to intimidate these people out of ever showing their support on the streets. That's the point of it. And so that was generally the least trouble you'd see from the left-wing side of things. But for now, we'll see where there were actually anti-immigration protests, where they actually turned up. Here's an image from Blackpool. Some idiots in masks once again. They're not all masked, but they're never all masked in scenes like this. Holding an England flag, obviously, thinking that there'd be more than 5 guys there. And that's pretty much the extent of far-right protest that I could find. Now compare it to Walthamstow, where, man, that is a lot of people. This is in London, by the way. And it's just night and day. Now it's clear to say that this was obviously a mostly peaceful protest, because they were effectively tilting at windmills, but that didn't stop some people saying some crazy things.
They hurt. We've got children and women using those trains, destroying some relatives. They are disgusting, nasty bastards, and we need to cut their throats and get rid of them all.
And now that is an anti-racist protester saying that actually the far-right protesters he thought that he would see here are nasty racist fascists and they need to have their throats slit. Effectively calling for violence, with a bunch of the kind of gentler left-wing activists all clapping, whooping and cheering when he was saying that, which is obviously a public order offence at the very least. Anyway, turns out this guy is actually part of Dartford Council. He is a Labour councillor. So I expect Labour to kick him out of the party at the very least, and I expect him to, at the very least, be arrested and investigated for a public order offence, because there is no way that saying I want to slit people's throats or we need to slit people's throats does not break the public order law, because that is obviously going to cause people distress. And we apparently live in a country where two-tier policing doesn't exist, so, you know, please show us this is the case. Anyway, the next day, front pages of newspapers were, let's just say I've got my cynical hat on, looking very coordinated. Standing together, picture of Walthamstow on the Mirror, obviously celebrating that, oh, look at this community coming together, all with Socialist Worker Party placards. You move to The Guardian, oh look, same picture, thousands take to the streets to counter threat from far right. This threat that, as it turns out, never existed, and the police allowed almost every town in England to believe they were going to burn down that night. Along with the news media. Were BBC Verify anywhere to be seen? Were these disinformation specialists out there saying this is disinformation? Of course they weren't. This disinformation doesn't matter. People only had to leave work early to pick up their kids from nurseries because they thought the town was going to burn down. Shops only had to put their shutters down a few hours early because they thought that their windows were going to get smashed in. But you know what saved it? These counter-protesters. They are the heroes of the day. The Times. I mean, on screen you may have not noticed that the newspaper actually changed, but thousands take to the street to confront far right. Again, using the exact same picture, by the way. These were happening all over the country. I just find it very strange they are only using the Walthamstow picture. You would have thought there would be a bit more diversity of thought and diversity of front pages when it came to Britain's different national newspapers, especially when it comes to the final one, which is the Daily Express. The only paper in this assortment I've got to were actually on Tory's side, which is generally seen as a right-wing paper. United Britain stands firm against thugs. Same picture. Again, cynical hat on, this is very, very coordinated, or at least gives the impression it's very coordinated. Now, is it possible that all these papers, these aren't the only ones that use the same picture and a similar headline, by the way. Is it possible they all just wanted to use the same picture along with the same story? Yeah, of course it is. That's obviously possible. But there is such a thing as too much coincidence. This is the issue the new elites have at the moment. You have what appear to be quite organic gettings together for rioting in a few towns in the north. You have the problem that you think that's going to spread, hell, I think it's still going to spread after this. And you need a way to dissipate the energy. What's the best way to do that? The best way to do that is to say, you come out, you are going to face thousands of people who are going to be protesting against you. And I'm not being funny. The underlying implication here is that it will result in violence. When in reality, the headlines I think should more be, look at all of these yobs who have been put through the system very quickly and are now going to jail. If I were the type who wanted to dissipate this thing properly and through the proper channels, that is the type of thing I'd be pushing. But they are all, including the right-wing ones, pushing the fact that it's this show of a massive amount of ordinary people, quote-unquote, who are all part of these left-wing activist groups who are going to be stopping you. They are standing firm against the thugs. They are showing solidarity against against racism or whatever. And I suppose, especially for the expressive side, who are typically anti-immigration, I can tell that they are doing this to try and stem the tide of riots. Because I don't want riots either. However, I don't think using a picture of 1,000 people and effectively saying... Again, the messaging so far has been like it was with the Sky News report at the start. Far-right protests, which obviously pretty much everyone knows effectively is just you don't like mass immigration, then quickly turns to you will be a rioter, which then quickly turns to that's going to end up with 1,000 people in your face that you need a dozen or so cops to get in the way of to stop you, well, to protect you, as the left-wingers said themselves. Protect them from what? Don't really know. They don't really go into detail on that. Anyway, the police were also singing the praises of these left-wing activists. Met Police Chief says fears of extreme right disorder abated after show of unity from communities. At least 100 far-right marches were planned to take place across the country last night. Completely unsubstantiated as far as I can tell. There's not even a Telegram post of that, including in London, but instead large numbers of counter-protesters turned out in multiple UK cities. And the most I could find was literally a grand total of 20 people appearing at any of these far-right marches. Literally 20 people. And we know there's more of them than that because we saw them all at the weekend. Anyway, the big news of the day appears to come from Nick Lowles, the head of Hope Not Hate. And this reveals quite a lot. As suspected, yesterday's protests outside law firms and migration help centres were designed to wind up, generate fear and waste time and resources. Very few anti-immigrant protesters turned up anywhere, and many saw none. If that was the strategy, then it badly backfired, because obviously of the amount of people that turned up to counter-protest. To which someone replied, the list was a hoax, but hope they enjoyed themselves. To which Nick replies, yes, the list was a hoax, but just look at the front page of today's papers. An anti-racist message is being transmitted to millions of homes this morning. Effectively, Nick Lowes here is saying, ma'am, we managed to quickly turn around the strategy and we won. Now, when it comes to the source of the Telegram, I have no idea who made it. No one knows who made it. Completely anonymous. Nothing to actually verify it. Nothing to verify that anyone was actually planning to go out at all. Literally nobody went out with a mask to attack solicitors or migrant camps. The one image that I have seen of people in masks was on a random roundabout somewhere in Blackpool. As far as I can tell, didn't do anything wrong. And yet, despite the fact that no one came out because this was one of the most obvious honeypots known to man, Nick Lowles is taking this as an absolute win because of the front pages. Because, yes, the message is you turn out to be against immigration in any capacity, because this isn't just about riots. Again, all of the media and the headlines on this were saying this was protesting. Which, again, if you look at the original Telegram post, wasn't a protest. It was a mask-up, attack these places. These are the targets. And it all turns out to be dump. It all turns out to be a hoax. Now, whether that was made by a random 4chan troll, or whether it was made by even someone from Hope Not Hate. We know Hope Not Hate are in these Telegram channels. We have no idea. But at this point, it doesn't matter. What matters is that Nick Lowles, as he says, they suspected it was a hoax at the time. They didn't try and verify it. And then everyone goes to, well, this is going to make the worst case scenario. And I still don't know where the 100 protest line came from. I don't think anyone's got a source on that apart from Sky and Hope Not Hate. But in the interest of giving you full context, Nick Lowe's does clarify by saying, by hoax I mean that the bloke simply compiled a list and hoped people would turn up rather than being arranged by local people. Which again, I have no doubt that Hope Not Hate knew this. I had no doubt that they knew there was no official organisation of local people to turn up and smash in solicitors and migrant help centres, because that would be stupid to do after last weekend. And so then it begs the question, why was this being spread as fully solidified fact, when in fact pretty much everyone who was involved and who has infiltrated these groups say, yeah, we were pretty sure it was a hoax at the time, actually. I mean, as well, there's still the suspect that this could have been something done by Hope Not Hate or someone else who infiltrated these channels. But they're obviously not going to say, yeah, this was done by us, because Hope Not Hate admitting to closing down 100 towns in the country and getting those people to panic over trying to get some good headlines the next day is something that is never going to be admitted. And it is not something that I'm saying that they did. We don't know what the source of that Telegram post was. Nobody is letting us know. Therefore, we are free to speculate because there's no solid facts on it as far as I can tell. Anyway, some good news on the two-tier policing update. It appears that at least some of the message has got through. Met Police made a tweet saying approximately 50 people have gathered in North End Road, Croydon. They've made clear their intention to cause disruption and fuel disorder. They dragged and threw objects down the road and thrown bottles at officers. This is not linked to the protest, of course it's not. This appears to be pure antisocial behaviour. Officers are moving in numbers to make arrests. So the scenes early in the evening was just a big group of, once again, mostly masked young men who were just walking down the streets of Croydon, quite similar to the one seen in South Yorkshire earlier. And here's a clip of the aftermath. Yep, as you can see, just massive pile of stuff, trash, garbage thrown in the middle of the roads. Obviously police officers had missiles thrown at them. Nowhere near as bad obviously as burning down hotels and smashing in Greggs, but this is still just complete antisocial behaviour for like no reason. It was the worst thing we saw yesterday. These far right protests, absolutely nothing. But to take advantage of all the disorder that was predicted, people came out just to be antisocial in Croydon. But there was other small scale disorder going on around London as well in other areas. Again, one has to assume this is partially through the fact that police had to dedicate all their resources to making sure that far-right riots that were never going to happen weren't definitely going to happen. Because there was a Virgin Mary statue desecrated at Wembley Church, just mindless thuggery that ended up with this, which again, I have a pretty universal rule on this. No thuggery, no rioting, no property damage. Seems like a pretty simple rule. Within the last 30 hours, there have been 2 murders in Tower Hamlets. Again, probably due to the fact that the police have had to have their resources spread out due to this panic. And again, I don't even just blame the hoaxers for that, whoever they were. I blame this on the rioters at the weekend. Of course they're panicking about this. Of course they're worried about escalation. Of course police resources are being stretched even more thinly. But this has likely led to these further murders. And then there was a shooting as well. Again in London, 3 boys have been taken to hospital after a triple shooting in Orpington, which involved an 18-year-old and 2 14-year-old boys being found with gunshot wounds. They're all only suffering from injuries as far as I can tell for now. There's been no deaths. But it's just amazing. All of this police resource gone into making sure hell isn't being brought upon Earth, and it all turns out to be a hoax that, as Hope Not Hate have said, yeah, it was always suspected. Great, you took police resources away over a suspected hoax, and now 2 men are dead, and 3 boys have been shot as a direct result of police resources having to be stretched thin. And whoever originally made the Telegram post, we are never going to find that out. So that is not part of why I am calling this a psyop. It is every bit of the reaction to it. BBC Verified didn't seem to look into it. It was suspected to be a hoax from the start by Hope Not Hate. All these spontaneous, quote-unquote, anti-racist protests that all seem to be organised by virulently left-wing activists who are well known for organising protests like that, along with Labour councillors. Yeah, just random spontaneity. All the headlines saying the same thing with the same picture. It very much looks organised from me with the cynic hat. Could this all be just a massive coincidence? Yes, of course it could. I cannot say anything for definite because I do not have enough evidence to say anything for definite. I do, however, have enough evidence to speculate, especially with patterns I've seen in the past, especially with the untrustworthy groups that we have seen involved in it as well, and from the results of it. This has only been good for Labour's PR, which is the main thing that the left-wing activists are pushing for. And so now we find ourselves in this situation. And once again from Sky News, from this morning, intelligence shows further protests planned in coming days, policing minister warns. About 100 protests were planned for Wednesday night with fears of more violence, but a heavy police presence and peaceful counter-protest won out. I think this tells you absolutely everything you need to know about this entire situation. Media report something, protests are going to happen, oh, it turns out it was you, it was the counter-protest, people that you can be part of that actually did this, which is nonsense. This was never going to happen as it turns out. Hope Not Hate say that they, at the very least, suspected that. And now they have the lovely narrative of you could be involved with these people that are saving the country and the multiculturalist dream. It's a very good, feel-good result for Labour and the Liberal left. It's great for their PR. It's an amazing narrative for them overall. Not a great day. This is why... Well, no, you shouldn't riot because it's a bad thing, full stop. But this is also why people who think riots are justified, you shouldn't do it. Especially in this day and age at the very least. Because you're just handing those in power freer wins. And you will end up just going to jail. Oh, for what? Oh, I nicked some Crocs and I nicked a few Greg's steak bakes. Oh, I managed to burn the part of the lobby of a hotel. Great, but now people like me who say don't riot, let's do things through the proper routes. Let's not have a complete breakdown of law and order in the streets. Now I'm going to be put in the same camp as you. Because as we saw from the first Sky News article, 100 protests planned. Oh, actually, we mean riots. It's always going to mean the same thing to these people, unfortunately. Anyway, one last thing as well, credit where it's due. The response to actually fast-track rioters, to have them do plea deals and get them sentenced quickly, and have all these reports of, oh, look at these rioters crying while this is all happening, you know, they're suffering the actions of their consequences. Again, that is a good PR win I can actually get on board with. I want people who riot and cause disorder to be scared to do so. As we saw yesterday, though, the people in Croydon obviously didn't get that memo. So this is the issue. The people who are benefiting from two-tier policing are acting like they're benefiting from two-tier policing. If you want to have the ultimate PR win, I would go down the route of trying to fix that issue. That is the advice I would give to Labour. But anyway... that is everything I had for you today. So once again, shill time actually. No more streams this week as far as I'm aware. However, no, that's not true. I am streaming, on Saturday with the Worcester Club, where I'll be with John reading through the first chapter, or at least our first part, of how Parliament works. So if you're interested in the ins and outs of how Parliament was working, about 100 years ago I think it was written, then please do come along and join in with that. Obviously, we will have Tosh Talks back next week. I believe I still need some topic suggestions for when I start the poll on Friday. And of course, hopefully Regional Variations returns next Wednesday. Tail did get in contact with me to say it wasn't on this week, but he kind of gave the implication it would be back at some point. And of course, Laughing at the Guardian will return next week, so we've got all that to look forward to. Anyway, like, subscribe, share with anyone who cares, give me memberships if you feel I earned that money. And, as usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.